to my fellow science teachers, to our very supportive Science Education Program Supervisor, Dr. Edwin Real Bermilio, and of course, our very own CID Chief, Dr. Milagros M. Peñaflor. A pleasant morning to all of you. Welcome to another Division webinar series on science content and teaching strategies in the context of most essential learning competencies for second quarter. I'm Francisco de Guzman, Teacher 2 from Luwakan National High School, Maine, and currently teaching General Chemistry 1 and Earth and Life Science. Today, I'll be your resource speaker and we will discuss the second quarter of Earth and Life Science, Week 3, which is describe the different ways of how representative animals reproduce. So it focuses on the animal reproduction. There are 3 objectives for this session. Number 1, compare and contrast the sexual and asexual reproduction of animals. Number 2, create a graphic organizer of different ways on how representative animals reproduce. For number 3, appreciate the value of reproduction. Before we start our discussion, let's have first our activity. All you need to do is identify which characteristic of living things is illustrated in the image. You may type your answer in the chat box or in the comment section. I'll give you 10 seconds for every illustration for you to have time in answering. For number 1 illustration, the correct answer for number 1 is living things metabolize. Next image. The correct answer is living things adapt and evolve. The third image. Okay, for number 3, living things reproduce. For the last image, the correct answer for number 4 is living things respond to stimuli. There are 2 questions to answer. Number 1, what organ systems are shown in number 3? Let's go back to item number 3. So we have the female reproductive organ and male reproductive organ. And second question, what could be the purpose of the organ systems in item number 3? So, alam na natin lahat ng sagot dito. It is for reproduction. Another activity is to arrange the steps in sexual reproduction in humans in the diagram. You may choose your answer in the box. So for participation, you may type your answer in the comment section. So this is the diagram. So we have 3 steps for male and also 3 steps for female. For the processes leading to pregnancy, we have 7 steps. Let's start with male. So there are 3 choices for male. For letter A, sperm cells exit the testicles and travel up the vas deferens. For letter B, sperm is made in the testicles. And last letter C, sperm cells mix with semen. So what would be the first step? The first step is letter B. So nafo-form muna yung sperm. The second step is letter A. So ang sperm cell ay umalis at nagtatravel papunta sa vas deferens. And the last step is letter C. Ang sperm cells ay mahalo sa semen. For female, these are the choices. Letter A, eggs enters fallopian tube. Letter B, ovulation occurs. And letter C, lining of uterus thickens with blood. So, what would be the first step for female? Okay, correct. letter B. Ovulation occurs. Kapag sinabi nating ovulation occurs, ito yung pagre-release ng egg cell mula sa ovary ng babae. And the second step naman is letter A. Egg enters fallopian tube. So from the ovary, alis naman ang egg cell at mag-travel to sa fallopian tube kung saan hintayin niyang sperm cell na mag-fertilize sa kanya. And then the last step natin is letter C. Lining of uterus thickens with blood. So, bakit nga ba nagtitikan ng blood that occurs during the menstrual cycle of women? So, kapag ang egg cell hindi na-fertilize, ang effect is demenstruation. Kaya minsan, kapag regular menstruation ng babae, at siya ay may partner o asawa at hindi siya dinatnan, isa lang ang ibig sabihin nun, na-fertilize yung egg at ang female or woman na ito ay pregnant. Para naman sa sagot leading to pregnancy, ano kaya sa mga choices natin ang first step? So, makikita natin that the male and female have already produced the gametes or sex cell para maging posible ang union nilang dalawa, pero hindi mangyayari ang union if there is no mating of female and male. What would be the first step? Okay, the correct answer is letter G. The erect penis inserted into vagina. That process called sexual intercourse. So, when a female and male is having sexual intercourse, the penis is inserted to the vagina of the female. Next to that, leading to the meeting of the sperm and the egg is letter A. So, during sexual intercourse, the penis enlarges and ejects sperm cell to the vagina. And the process of the ejection of the sperm cell is called ejaculation. Next step is letter F. After the sperm has been released inside the female reproductive organ, it will travel through the cervix, uterus, and into the fallopian tubes. So, how many sperm we are talking about? So, millions of sperm cells. So, ganun kadami ang na-eject na sperm during one ejaculation. So now, what kind of environment is experienced by the sperm cells? Harsh environment. Kung i-relate natin, that's why out of millions of sperm cells, talagang pagdating nito sa fallopian tube, kaunti na lang sila. So maybe few hundreds or less. Kasi ang katawan ng babae is killing the sperm cell that enters the woman's body. So that's why tayo na nag-exist, we are 1 out of the million chances ng sperm from our father. Next is letter B. Isang sperm cell lang ang mag-fertilize ng egg out of millions deposited during the sexual intercourse by the male. Isa lamang sa million ang mag-fertilize ng egg cell. Next step is letter E. Kapag nagkaroon na ng fertilization, mag-start na mag-divide ang cell. Next step is letter C. The cell or yung na-divide na cell called the zygote, it will travel through the fallopian tube to the uterus. So mula sa fallopian tube kung saan nag-meet ang sperm at ang egg, bababa na ito sa uterus. Paano kung halimbawa hindi nakababa ang zygote sa uterus at nagstay lang siya sa fallopian tube? Masasabi ba na pregnant pa rin ang babae? The answer is yes. Although this type of pregnancy is called ectopic pregnancy at usually hindi nagiging successful. Lastly, the cell attached to the wall of uterus for the implantation. So, dito na mag-start ang development ng zygote papuntang fetus hanggang sa mag-develop at bago lumabas bilang full-grown baby. These are the processing questions. So, some of the answers are already presented in the previous activity, so pwede nating balikan. At any rate, subukan nating sagutan. For number 1, what process is the release of a sperm cell during sexual intercourse? The answer is ejaculation. So sometimes yung ibang male, they associate the Tagalog term into the act of doing it. But in English term, the ejaculation is the release of the sperm. Number 2 question, what is fertilization and where does it happen? So fertilization, mga keywords siguro na dapat tandaan is union. Pag-isa ng sperm at egg. Saan ito nangyayari? Sa fallopian tube. Number 3 question, what is cell called after fertilization? And where does this cell attach and develop during pregnancy? So ang tawag sa nagde-develop na cell initially after fertilization is the zygote. At ito ay bababa mula sa fallopian tube papuntang uterus kung saan ito mag-i-implant at magde-develop. For number 4 question, if sperm cell and egg cell doesn't meet inside the woman's body, can babies be still produced? So, meron daw bang pagkakataon na si sperm cell at egg cell ay pagtatagpuin hindi sa loob ng katawan ng babae? Pwede ba itong mag-develop into baby? And for number 5, how does sexual reproduction occur? So those are the 5 questions. Now let us proceed with the discussion on the animal reproduction. The same with plants, animals may reproduce sexually and asexually. Let's proceed first with the asexual reproduction in animals. In asexual reproduction, it also needs a single parent or one parent, and this parent can actually produce new organisms. Again, in asexual reproduction, it does not need sex cells or the sperm cells and egg cells. And the offspring are identical with each other and with the parent. One of the advantages of asexual reproduction is that it happens in a short time, and at the same time, there is a less energy needed in order this to happen. It is because the organism doesn't need a mate or doesn't need to find a mate and does not need to undergo sexual intercourse. On the other hand, one of the disadvantages of asexual reproduction is that it lacks genetic variation. It is because it only comes from a single parent. And this means if there is a specific phenomenon that could wipe them out, they could actually wipe out because they not vary with each other. Now, what are the ways on how animals produce asexually? The first one, through binary fission. So from the word binary, which means two, so organisms divide into two new organisms. And these two new organisms are exact copies of each other or with each other. It happens through mitosis. There are 3 types of binary fission. So we have the regular, longitudinal, and the transverse. An example of organisms that undergo binary fission are paramecium. A very common examples are the bacteria. So we have here examples of organisms that undergo binary fission. So we have here for letter A, that's an amoeba. So that's amoeba splits into two. The two new organisms are now separates into individuals. For letter B, that's a euglena. This is a longitudinal fission, so it separates longitudinally. For letter C, that is a paramecium, divides in a transverse plane, so it divides in this portion. And we also have the serracium. This is the oblique division, so it divides here. We also have the budding. A new organism develops from an outgrowth or bud due to the cell division at one particular site. The new organism remains attached as it grows, separating from the parent organisms only when it is mature enough. So we have here the parent organism, and there is a particular site, or there is a portion of this parent cell wherein a bud can develop. So this bud can mature, and once it is mature, it can break apart from this parent, forming now a separate individual, and that is called budding. On the other hand, we also have fragmentation and regeneration. So fragmentation and regeneration happen in partner. In fragmentation, the parent splits into pieces, and the pieces may form into new organisms. So we have here a planaria. This platform, for example, broken apart, so the broken pieces could form into a new planaria. This is the head, and the head could form into new individual. And then this is the tail, still could form into new individual. On the other hand, for the regeneration, which is always happen with partner with fragmentation, this is just the renewal, restoration, and growth that makes organisms. So we have here the sea star again, for example. If the piece or arm of the sea star is broken apart, a new arm would be developed from the last part. And broken arms could actually develop into new organism. We also have the parthenogenesis. This is the growth and development of embryos without fertilization. So basically, there is no involvement of sperm cell and egg cell. Example of organisms that reproduce asexually through parthenogenesis are the Komodo dragon, and we have example here. So we have the honeybees. So in honeybees, when there is fertilization, the male contributes the sperm cell, and the queen or the female contributes egg cell. There is fertilization, therefore, in the process, they could actually a new organism. And if there is a fertilization, the organism developed is actually only a female. So it can develop into worker, so specifically into sterile female, or it could develop into a queen. On the other hand, if there is no fertilization, the egg cell could also develop into new organism. So there is no fertilization in this process called as parthenogenesis. There is no union of sperm cell and egg cell. What is only involved in parthenogenesis is the egg cell. So the egg cell could develop into new organism, and if fertilization or the parthenogenesis is the process, it could only develop a male honeybee, specifically called as drone. Now for sexual reproduction in animals, this is the process wherein there is a union of sperm cells and egg cells. This only happens in dioecious. So when we say dioecious, these animals only contain a single reproductive system, and at the same time can only produce a single type of sex cell. For example, for us in humans, males can only produce sperm cells, and female can only produce egg cells. This can also happen to hermaphrodites, like for example, earthworms and some fishes, or organisms that have both the sex cells on their body. On the other hand, this can also happen in sequential hermaphrodites, where in some portions of their life cycle, they can become hermaphrodites. So they are dioecious, but in some portions, they are hermaphrodites. Example of hermaphrodites are the earthworms. There are three steps in sexual reproduction. First is the gametogenesis, or the production of sperm cells and egg cells, and then spawning, and the last one is fertilization. For gametogenesis, This is just the production of gametes in gonads or in the sexual organs of these organisms. Example for the gonads, for male we have the testes and for female is the ovaries. For spawning naman, this is the bringing of gametes together. In other words, this is the copulation or the sexual intercourse. Last one is the fertilization, in which the union of sperm cell and the egg cell. And fertilization can happen in two ways. One could be internal and the other one is external. When we say external fertilization, this is sometimes called informal fertilization. And this external fertilization mostly happens in fish and amphibians, in which the external fertilization, the union of the sperm cell and egg cell, happens not inside the body of the organisms, but happens in the environment. So in case of fish, the female fish just releases the egg cells, while the male fish releases the sperm cells. And in the environment, randomly the sperm cell and egg cell might unite, and that is called external fertilization. On the other hand, for internal fertilization, it is just the opposite of external fertilization. It takes place inside the body of the organism. So the internal fertilization happens if there is a copulation or the sexual intercourse or the physical union that aids in the delivery of sperm to the female's body. And once fertilization is successful, the developing embryo can be either found inside the body or inside an egg. Examples of oviparous organisms or organisms that develop their embryo in an egg are the reptiles and fish. On the other hand, we have the viviparous. These are the animals that carry their young inside their body until their young are mature enough to be born alive and live independently. Very common example for this one is as humans. For this one, we have the egg-laying animal, which is the oviparous. And the second one, we have the dog, which is the viviparous. This is a related lesson to our discussion. For additional topic, let us talk about in vitro fertilization. So, in vitro fertilization is a complex series of procedures used to help with fertility or prevent genetic problems and assist with the conception of a child. During the in vitro fertilization, mature eggs are collected from ovaries and fertilized by sperm in laboratory. Kung maaalala nyo, yun isang tanong natin sa activity, kung possible raw ba na ang sperm cell at ang egg cell mag-meet sa labas ng babae? And the answer to that is yes. And the process is called in vitro fertilization, where the sperm and the egg union is assisted sa isang laboratory. So, sino yung mga gumagawa o nag-undergo ng in vitro fertilization procedure? So, mostly yung mga mag-asawa na hirap magkaanak o makabuo ng bata. Posible na isa sa kanila ay mababang sperm count, so hindi sapat yung sperm count to support the need para yung sperm ay masucceed na makapunta sa fallopian tube. So, what happens? Kukuha ng mature na egg sa ovary ng babae, kukuha ng set ng sperm sa lalaki at i-fertilize ang sperm at ang egg sa laboratory. Madami rin application ang in vitro fertilization sa animal reproduction. May mga animals na critically endangered or threatened at yung bilang ng kanilang population ay pababa na pababa, and sometimes these animals hindi ganun kabilis magparami. And what scientists do? They harvest the sex organs mula sa animals na ito and they try to do in vitro fertilization para kapag nag-succeed ang union o fertilization, ilalagay nila ito sa katawan to develop. To understand better the in vitro fertilization, so let's try to watch this interview conducted by ABS-CBN News to Mr. Joel Cruz. So we are able to describe the sexual reproduction in humans and animals. We also compare or describe the asexual reproduction to sexual reproduction of animals. So we have the budding, fragmentation, and the parthenogenesis. And gaano nga ba kahalaga ang reproduction? It is very essential for the perpetuation of the species para yung population ng isang organismo or organism ay magpatuloy na pabuhay. We also inform the process of in vitro fertilization na kung saan the mating or the union of the sperm and egg can happen outside the body of woman. For the last activity, let's try to answer these questions based on the given figure. So you may type your answer in the chat box or in the comment section. What type of asexual reproduction in animals is shown in the figure? The correct answer is fragmentation. What type of asexual reproduction in animals is shown in the figure? The correct answer is budding. What type of asexual reproduction in animals is shown in the figure? The correct answer is parthenogenesis. Next, what type of fertilization is exhibited by the organism in the figure? Is it viviparous or oviparous? Okay, dogs exhibited internal fertilization and also they are viviparous. Next, what type of fertilization is exhibited by the organism in the figure? Is it viviparous or oviparous? It's obvious they are exhibited external fertilization and they are oviparous. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. I would like to take this time to thank to all teachers. Alam ko sa panahon na to marami po tayong ginagawa at tinatapos na mga reports. Huwag po natin kalimutan bigyang pahinga ang ating sarili. Ingat po ang lahat.